So the setting for Daniel chapter 7 is the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read maybe the first 3 verses of the chapter and try and explain what they're talking about, and then I'll go to an illustration of what Daniel saw in his dream. So, verse 1 says, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea." So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and explain what the 4 winds of the heaven, what those are. Remember, I've said many times that the Bible interprets itself. Especially when it comes to prophecy, where symbolism, a lot of symbolism is used. A lot of Christians struggle to understand what those symbols mean, and I used to struggle as well with understanding what those symbols mean. And there are still things that I still don't understand, especially in the book of Revelation, that I'm still trying to learn. So, what do the 4 winds? What are the 4 winds of the heaven that Daniel says strove upon the great sea? If we go to Revelation, Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. I actually try and let's see if we can do that whilst I'm actually doing the video. Don't know if the Wi-Fi is going to be strong enough for where I am, because it's a bit slow. I'm a bit far from Starlink. So Revelation 7 verses 1 to 3 will explain to us what the 4 winds are. "And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads." And then, as you read on in this chapter, this is Revelation chapter 7. Just as a reminder, it's going to start talking about the 144,000. Excuse me. So the winds. We're going back to the issue of the winds. So here, where we can see, if it's not very clear, basically the winds are winds of strife. Okay, winds of strife, because it talks about these 4 winds being held back by the angels, so that they would not destroy or not hurt the earth, neither the sea nor the trees. Okay, till the 144,000 are sealed. So if we go back to now, if we read now the end part of Daniel chapter 7 verse 2, it talks about the great sea, and I will explain what the sea means in prophecy, but let's just read verse 3, and it says, "And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another." So before we deal with the 4 beasts, let's deal with the sea, because that's also mentioned in verse 2. The very last word in verse 2 is the word sea. What does the sea represent? The sea, if we go to Revelation 17:15, let's see if we can get to that quickly. Revelation 17:15. Here we get an explanation of what water or seas mean, okay? And it says, "And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So this is a highly populated area. That's what the sea means in prophecy, or waters mean in prophecy. Okay, so now from verse so in chapter 7 of Daniel and verse 4 going onwards is when Daniel starts explaining what he saw in his dream. The first thing he mentions is that he saw, says the first, remember he mentioned in verse 3 says, and four great beasts came up from the sea. So in fact, before I talk about verse 4, let me just explain what the beasts are. I almost forgot to do that. Beasts in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel 7, Daniel chapter 7, let's start with verse 17. To get an explanation of what the beasts are. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. Yeah? So this is actually chapter 7 itself of Daniel that we're dealing with. We get the answer right there of what beasts are. The beasts are four kings. But if we go to verse 23 of the same chapter, Daniel chapter 7, verse 23. Daniel chapter 7, verse 23, it says, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. So what is a beast then? A beast can be a king or a kingdom. Because we don't forget that a king represents a kingdom, okay? A beast is a kingdom or a king. So if we go back to Daniel chapter 7, it's verse 4 onwards starts to talk about what Daniel saw. So I'll just show you the illustration which has been which artists have depicted of what they think Daniel saw in his dream. So on the right side there is what is thought to have been seen by Daniel in his dream. So the first thing he saw was a lion with eagle's wings. So I'm not going to be reading the whole chapter of Daniel chapter 7, because I've already said many times I don't see a need for me to read, because you guys can read for yourself. What I want to do is share what God has taught me over the years in terms of prophecy. So the first thing that Daniel was shown was a lion with eagle's wings, and we know that it's talking about Babylon. That's a representation of Babylon. And there are even I've mentioned this before as well in my videos, that I actually used to be in the British Army, in the Royal Army Medical Corps. I was working as a medic, and when the second Iraq War kicked off, in Britain we used to call it optelic, or optelic, TELIC. That was we used to call it a tour. That was the tour that we went on when we went to Iraq. I went to Iraq for 6 months. I think it was from November 2003 to about May 2004, with a short break in between of about 2 weeks. The reason why I'm telling you all this is because after going to Iraq for 6 months, not immediately, but a short while later, those who had gone to Iraq on the tour of Iraq, when that second Iraq war kicked off, where it was mainly the British and Americans and some of the NATO member countries basically invaded Iraq. We got medals basically for taking part in that tour. So this is the medal that I received for going to Iraq. It was like this. I don't have that medal anymore. I sold it because I actually don't agree. I didn't know when I started researching and studying for myself, I realized that we had been lied to basically. And I think a lot of people now know that the whole story about Saddam Hussein and his government having weapons of mass destruction, that was a lie. Obviously, that was just an excuse that was made to attack Iraq. And Iraq had no connections to 9/11, which was 9/11 itself was an inside job done by the American government through the CIA and also through the Israeli Mossad and the FBI. The job of FBI, according to my understanding, was to cover up the fact that it was an inside job, to make it look like they were investigating it whilst covering it up. So I got a medal similar to this one here. This was the reverse side. As you can see, it says Iraq. Okay, so this is very similar to what Daniel saw in his dream, a lion with eagle's wings. So this might not necessarily be a lion, but it's got the head of a human being, but a man's head on it. This would have been the reverse side of the medal. So that's very similar to it's kind of like you can see the connections there, even from a secular view. And I know I've said that we're not supposed to use secular sources to define or to help us to explain prophecy, but I'm just showing you what my personal experiences were, and it's kind of more evidence to show that Babylon, remember Iraq was the center of Babylon. Yeah, so similar symbolisms, and even I've actually been to the museum in London. I can't remember what exactly it's called. Is it the London Museum? And they have these types of sculptures in there, showing that Babylon or Iraq is where Babylon used to be. Okay, so that was the first beast that Daniel saw in his dream. And it says that these four beasts, so we have a lion, a bear, a leopard with wings, and a beast that Daniel couldn't describe. They all came out of the sea, meaning they came out of heavily populated areas. In contrast to the beast that comes up out of the earth in the second part of Revelation 13, which is talking about America, because America, yes, had a population, had millions of Indians on it, but not as heavily populated as Europe. So, or places like Babylon, which is where the lion came out of. Okay. So the second beast that Daniel saw in his dream was a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, and it was hunched up on one side. So the one side was higher than the other. So let's deal with the fact that the bear was raised up on one side compared to the other. This is talking about because the bear represents Middle Persia, which were like 2 nations in one. Okay, one was stronger than the other. Okay, let's deal with the 3 ribs in its mouth. They represent the 3 nations that were conquered by the Middle Persians, and these were Egypt, which was conquered in 525 BC, and then the Assyrians, which were conquered in 615 BC, and then the Babylon itself was conquered in 539. Remember last time in my other video where I spoke about Daniel, I think it's chapter 5, where Belshazzar, this same king, was mentioned in verse 1 of chapter 7. Belshazzar was king at the time when, because he was a Babylonian king, he was a king when Babylon was conquered by the Middle Persia, and he was having this feast and drinking from the cups that had been taken from Jerusalem, making a mockery of God. And he was that very night when he saw the hand writing on the wall. That very night, Belshazzar was destroyed. He was killed, and then the Medo Persians took over as the next kingdom that was prophesied in prophecy in the book of Daniel. So the next kingdom, or the next beast that Daniel saw in his dream was a leopard with wings on it, and this represented Greece. So all this can be confirmed by studying history. So something else is what I wanted to do is just to compare these two, Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7. So the lion with eagle's wings is the same as the head of gold on the metal man of Daniel chapter 2. Okay, the chest and arms of silver represent 2 arms Medo-Persia, okay? The two arms represent Medo-Persia, which corresponds with the bear that was also hunched up on one side. Um, and something else that's interesting is that these nations actually also were well known for using these same metals. So gold was very um, the kingdom of Babylon had a lot of gold. That's why even Nebuchadnezzar was able to build that very large image or statue in the plains of Jura that was made of all gold. They even had a temple to Marduk that was made of tons of gold as well. Silver, to say that the Medo-Persians used a lot of silver. The Greeks used a lot of brass, okay, and iron was used by the Romans quite a lot. So I'd finish with Medo-Persia, and then Greece. On the metal man, it was represented by um, thighs, the belly and thighs of brass. Okay, and then when you go down, two legs representing the eastern and western Roman empires. So, yeah, why did the leopard in the dream have wings on it? Because it represented how swift the Greeks would conquer the other nations around them. Okay, and then when we get to Daniel chapter 8, we read uh, about a horn that was broken off. Okay, and then four horns came up after it. That horn represents Alexander the Greek. Okay, was the first king, but we'll get to that when we get to Daniel chapter 8. So the wings represent how swift the Greeks were at conquering the other nations. Obviously, one of the nations they conquered was Medo-Persia. And then after that, we have this beast that the artists depict as, it looks almost like a dinosaur, but it had 10 horns on its head, representing pagan Rome. So this is actually the last beast in Daniel's dream in Daniel chapter 7, corresponding to the two legs of iron, which I've already said represent Eastern and Western Rome. And of course, Eastern Rome kind of broke off from the papacy because the Orthodox Church did not refuse to recognize. This is after this is after pagan Rome was changed and became the Roman Catholic Church. The Orthodox Christians refused to recognize the Pope, and it led to what's called the Great Schism, which happened around the year 1100, where the Orthodox Christians broke away from the Catholic Church because they did not recognize the Pope as being head of all their churches, including their own church. And at that point, I think from my history, and even in a book that I've written, I said that the Orthodox Christians at that point in time in history still kept the Sabbath, and the papacy did not keep the Sabbath. So those were the two main reasons why they broke away. So anyway, this in Daniel chapter 7, if you look at my cursor here, this is what the artists have depicted as the fourth beast that Daniel saw in his dream, a beast that he could not describe. It had 10 horns on its head. What did the 10 horns represent? Basically, the Roman, pagan Rome, when pagan Rome started to disintegrate, it broke down to 10 kingdoms. Some of those kingdoms still exist now, today. You know, the Italians, the French, the Portuguese, the Anglo-Saxons, but three of them were destroyed. Okay, and the ones who were destroyed when the little horn that's mentioned in Daniel chapter 7. If you just go back here and I'll read that for you. Where does it mention the little horn? Verse 8 of Daniel chapter 7. I considered the horns which are on the fourth beast here on its head. It says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. So an 11th horn came up, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So here, I'll explain this, just in case I forget. A mouth speaking great things, that's blasphemy, okay? So we know that that little horn is the papacy. And the 3 horns, the, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. These 3 horns that were uprooted were the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. They were plucked up when the papacy was coming up. And in history, we read that the papacy basically sent armies to destroy them. It is said by some historians that the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths did not believe in the Trinity doctrine. So once again, for those who claim to be Christians and those who claim to be Protestants, if you believe in the Trinity, that is a totally Catholic belief, which was also taken from paganism, because the Egyptians also believe in the Trinity and the Babylons did too. So yeah, so 10 horns on the head of the 4th beast. 3 of them were uprooted or completely destroyed. The Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths don't exist today. But that's not the end of the prophecy. It says that just going on here. We know that from in Daniel chapter 2, there was a rock that smashed this statue here on the feet. Okay, so we know that that's not the end of the prophecy. It says here that basically God is going to destroy this whole worldly system that's being set up here on this earth. Verse 24, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, the papacy, and he shall be diverse. Diverse means different from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings, the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. Blasphemy. Blasphemy is when someone claims to be God or to have the same power that God has, including claiming to forgive sins, okay? And shall wear out the saints. Here it means persecute the saints, kill the saints, and think to change times and laws. So right now, I said in one of my previous videos, I was just talking about, asking a question which I then answered. I was saying, who is responsible for the persecution of Christians in Nigeria, or in North Korea or China, or even in Britain and other Western countries, or even in America? It is the papacy, because the papacy doesn't like competition. They want everyone to bow down to them and acknowledge them as being supreme. So here, verse 25, which I've also referred to many times in my videos, and so he shall not only wear out the sins of the Most High, he shall think to change times and laws. This belief that the day begins at midnight, or that the year starts on the 1st of January, which is not the case in God's calendar. The year starts in spring, not on the 1st of January. And then the other thing is the Sabbath. They changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. Someone also said that thinking to change times and laws refers to this belief that the Antichrist is in the past, futurism and preterism, basically. When it was commonly understood by Protestants in the past that the papacy is Antichrist. Now these 2 Jesuits came up, and Ribera and Alcazar came up and said that Antichrist is in the past, or is in the future, which causes a lot of confusion. And there are a lot of Protestants who believe that, but those are false doctrines from the Catholic Church to take away heat from the papacy. Verse 26, but the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end, and the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints. So the saints of God are going to take the kingdom of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. So that's what Daniel chapter 7 is talking about the four major kingdoms or five major kingdoms that will come upon the earth. And don't be fooled by this one. This one changed and started. He put on a Christian garb and pretends to be a Christian church, but it's not. It's the Roman Empire. So for all those who say that it's the Jews that are running the show, or it's the Masons. Well, the Masons are actually controlled by the Jesuits. They were started by the Jesuits. Okay, and the Jews are just the tail of the beast rather than the head. The head is the papacy. Okay, I'm just using that for illustration purposes, and all these other organizations, whether it be the Bilderbergers, Opus Dei, the World Economic Forum, Council for Foreign Relations, and Chatham House, and there are hundreds of secretive organizations, the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Columbus. They are all basically front organizations for the papacy, with the dominant one being the Jesuits, who came a bit late to the show, but they managed to acquire a lot more power than some of these organizations that were already there. For instance, the Dominicans and the Franciscans, that were already there before the Jesuits were set up and it is said that there is a bit of animosity between some of these Catholic orders, like the Franciscans and the Dominicans don't like the Jesuits. And it was actually the Dominicans that used to run the Office of Inquisition, which was then taken over by the Jesuits. But they're all working together. Don't be fooled by that. The one at the very top is the Jesuits, who are now controlling the papacy, and above them is Satan. Okay, so that's Daniel chapter 7. I hope that helps everyone to get a better understanding.